band people. Welcome, y'all. Thanks for being here. My name's Tim. For those of you who don't know me, I'm supposed to send my greetings from Brandon. Brandon is, he's doing this doctoral program at Lipscomb, and he has to go 4 different times for these 2-week intensives where he basically spends 2 weeks in class. So he's at Lipscomb right now. This week and next week, he'll be doing these 2 weeks. So this is actually his second of 4, and so a year from now, he will do this again. He'll do it again in July, again in February, and then he has a year to write his dissertation. He's going to be a doctor of ministry, so he can perform spiritual surgery. Thanks, sweetheart. That's my wife, Becca, who just sang those 2 beautiful songs. And this morning, I woke up and she had given me a 6-pack of Reese's Hearts, which the holiday-themed Reese's have a higher peanut butter to chocolate ratio than a standard Reese's, which is, in my opinion, the way that life was meant to be had. There's no wrong way to eat a Reese's. Thank you, Oliver. And she got a coffee mug that says, "You're freaking awesome," and heart. I freaking love you. Yes. Which would be inappropriate language, I think. For church? Yeah. No. This is Sojourn, and for those of you who are new, I've met some people tonight. Our goal, we've got this little catchphrase: in the hectic journey of life, find a place to rest in the love and grace of Jesus. So we're trying to create an opportunity for you to worship in the middle of the week and get some Bible study. And tonight we're going to focus on Lent because today is Ash Wednesday. It's the beginning of a season called Lent. It's also Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you who are here because you're not on a date. And thank you for being here. We are starting our first real series next week called Telos. And telos is a Greek word that means the end or the goal or the purpose. And it's basically a 5-week series talking about why are we here? And what is this about? And what does God want for our lives? And so that's what we're going to be diving into next week. It's going to take us 5 weeks. And then at the end of that, we're going to do another one of our weeks. Kind of like, wasn't last week kind of cool where we did like the prayer and worship experience thing? We just kind of made that up last week. And I thought it was really cool. And several of you told me that. So anyway, tonight, being Ash Wednesday, I want to talk about Lent. So by a show of hands, how many of you are familiar or have practiced Lent or have had Lent as part of your life before? Raise it really high. Okay, now keep your hand raised, because those of you who've right now raised your hand, you are part of my question and answer session. Okay, so just tell me real quickly, in your own terms to you, what is Lent? What does it mean to you? What is Lent? Shout it out. Preparation. Oh, well, you've heard this message before. What does Lent mean to you? Waiting, okay. What else? Sacrificial. I like that. That's Kevin, the drummer. If the drummer can give us an answer, some of you can too. That was a drummer joke. Anybody else? All right, here's the textbook definition of Lent. I'm going to throw this up on the screen for us. Lent is the period preceding Easter that in the Christian church is devoted to fasting, abstinence, and penitence in commemoration of Christ's fasting in the wilderness. In the Western church, it runs from Ash Wednesday, that's today, to Holy Saturday, and so includes 40 weekdays. You can leave that up there for a second. Caitlin, you guys have this, the textbook definition. That's what the Webster people have told us. If you're like me, you didn't grow up practicing Lent. A lot of you actually had your hand raised. You've got some sort of familiarity with it. But a lot of people, like in this kind of, Protestant tradition of Christianity, it's not a rhythm that they're used to. And so for me, I think of 2 things when I think of Lent traditionally. One, I think of people walking around with the ash on their forehead. Like today, I saw what's the dude's name from the Transformer movies? And I'm really good. Mark Wahlberg. He's Catholic. He's a devout Catholic, and he had a thing on his Instagram page of him and his wife with this like black smudge of a cross on their forehead, and they were wishing everybody a happy Ash Wednesday, which is kind of weird to say Happy Ash Wednesday. But the other thing I think of when I think of Lent is giving something up. You hear people say, "What are you giving up for Lent?" And for me, it's like in the years past, even though I've never been to an Ash Wednesday service until about 3 or 4 years, or probably 7 years ago now, or I would say, I'm going to give up this for Lent. But I wasn't really practicing Lent. I was just like, I'm going to give up pizza because I'm getting fat, you know? Like I'm going to give something up but I wasn't really practicing Lent. And so tonight I want to take a closer look at that, because what happened was I I walked into a Lent. I went to a kind of a hipster church in Omaha, Nebraska that met in a movie theater. Not a movie theater. It was it was the kind of place where I was the worship leader like Matt, and I would show up on Sunday morning. It was a theater, a community theater, but it was a very large community theater in Omaha, the Omaha Community Playhouse. And we'd show up one day, and we'd be on the set of the Christmas Carol, and we would like literally have all the stuff set up just like this, but you'd be in Tiny Tim's house. One year they were doing South Pacific, and we walked in on a Sunday morning to set up, and there was a battleship on the stage, and our bass player climbed up the thing and was 12 feet in the air, and he played from the edge of the battleship just because he said he had to do it. But what was the story of that? Oh, so there was a guy at our church who grew up Catholic, and he had kind of talked to the pastor, and he had a series of services that he would do during Advent and during Lent, and he was kind of leading them. Our pastor said, if you want to put the work in and do it. So he created this Ash Wednesday service. I went to it. I learned a lot about it, and I started investigating it. And so my hope is that tonight we can talk about the what Lent is, why people observe it, and how we might be able to incorporate it into our lives this year. So I want to start with the history of Lent. This is going to be a little bit of a history lesson, and it's very simply that there was this, it's not a new idea, okay? Lent has been around for a long time. This is not something that we created in the 60s or the 70s or even in this century. There was this dude named Irenaeus who was born back in 130 A.D. He was a Christ follower. He became a leader in the early church. So he's 130 A.D. He was born about 100 years after Christ was actually on the earth. And he wrote prolifically. If you study church history, Irenaeus is a name that pops up time and time again. And Irenaeus started writing about this practice that sounded a lot like what we observe as Lent now, way back then when he was alive in the 100s A.D. Later in 325 A.D., there's a thing that you might have heard of called the Council of Nicaea. And the Council of Nicaea was a gathering of Christians. And here's a few things that happened at the Council of Nicaea. One, they established Easter as its own Christian holiday. That's when Easter became Easter. They wrote this slightly influential thing called the Nicene Creed, which we still quote or sing songs about. Matt's favorite song is basically the Nicene Creed written to music. And they discussed this 40-day season leading up to Easter called Lent. And it was like an official church doctrine, not doctrine, it was official church stance at that point. So Lent is something it's been around for a long time. That is 1900 years ago, Irenaeus is writing about it. That's 1700 years ago. It's being discussed by the official Christians. And it starts out as something that's a really strict, back then they were creating laws and rules. This is how we're going to do this. This is going to be about fasting and prayer. And it's going to be about Christians repenting of their sins, removing things from their lives that distract them from Jesus. But over the course of the past several centuries, Lent has developed and taken new shape across the world, in fact. And so today we think of it as a time of giving something up or a season leading up to Easter. But it's always been, and it still is supposed to be, a time for you to slow down and focus on Christ. It is the lead up to Easter. So that's the what it is, where it came from. The next question is, why do people observe Lent? So it's not just the season leading up to Easter. But Easter is, we had the Super Bowl last week, or the Winter Olympics. Is anybody watching the Winter Olympics? Nobody? Okay, cool. It's so good, right? It's like addictive. Like, I don't care about curling, but if the Americans get a medal, I'm stoked about it. Like, I've suddenly become an American when it becomes time for the Olympics. Like, my wife is really into ice skating, and I don't care about that, but there's something about watching these, like the ones where the dude throws the woman up in the air and she spins, and then he catches her and he sets her down. Like, if I was doing that, it would be like, whoa! But he's like setting her down like she doesn't weigh anything, and it's very impressive. Super Bowl, did anybody see the commercial of Eli Manning doing Dirty Dancing with Odell Beckham Jr.? Like, and it was so, and you were like, they're gonna do the lift, aren't they? You're waiting for it, and they finally did the lift. It was awesome. I say all of that to say this. Easter is the Super Bowl of Christianity, right? It's the thing that we're leading up to. It's our huge celebration that Jesus is no longer dead. He rose from the grave. He defeated sin and death. He is announcing to the world that he is king. He is resurrected. That's what it is. But so Lent isn't just okay, we got to have a time where we feel bad about ourselves. So let's do it right before Easter. there was actually some meaning and some purpose behind that. My wife has heard me give this message before, and so she stole my punchline, but it's simply this. It's okay, I forgive you. It was one of those Valentine's days where we've had to apologize a lot. It wasn't like all lovey-dovey. Turn now. Don't tell me how to drive. I said turn. I'm sorry.
Out of fairness.
We're not going to no. This is not how this was supposed to go. Lent's not just thrown in before Easter willy-nilly. Lent is a preparation for Easter. That's the word she used. Lent is a preparation for Easter. It prepares those who are observing it to celebrate Jesus at Easter because it's reminding us just how much we need him as a lead up to it. Easter is the Super Bowl. Easter is us saying, Jesus is king. Jesus is resurrected. This is why we're in this thing. This is why we buy in. But Lent is this season where we recognize our weaknesses, where we recognize our sin, where we fast, we give things up as a sign of humility and dependence on Christ. Have you ever seen someone with the Ash Wednesday cross that I talked about? I've got a little drawing here for you. It's ash, and if you go to an Ash Wednesday service, they use real ashes, and they make a cross on your forehead. Sometimes you just think it's a smudge, but it's intended to be the shape of a cross. And oftentimes when you're at that service, the person is going to say to you quietly as they place this ashen cross on your forehead, "Remember, you are dust, and to dust you shall return." Think about that. Remember, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. It's ashes that are a reminder of our own brokenness and our own sin, but a cross that symbolizes who Jesus is in the midst of that. In 2 Corinthians, this guy named Paul, who's an apostle of Christ, talks about how he was given a thorn. He called it a thorn in his flesh that kept him from being conceited. And we never find out exactly what that thorn was. He doesn't spell it out. Christians for many centuries have debated what Paul's thorn was. But it was clearly a source of weakness for him. This is 2 Corinthians 12, 8 through 10. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." This is Paul again. "Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Listen carefully to this. Recognizing our weaknesses helps us recognize the perfect power and the strength of Christ. Imagine how excited you would be to celebrate Jesus at Easter if you spent the 40 days leading up to Easter being reminded of your own weaknesses, being reminded that his power is made perfect in your weaknesses, that he is strong where wouldn't Easter be a bigger celebration if you had spent that time leading up to it reminding yourself of your own weaknesses? Speaking of 40 days, that leads us to another why question. Why is Lent 40 days? By the way, it's 40 days not counting Sundays. The math doesn't work out there. But in the early church, each Sunday was supposed to be a mini Easter celebration. So when you're celebrating Lent, the Sundays are not the days that you're giving something up or you're quitting something, whatever it is. You're getting a break on Easter because that's a mini Easter celebration. And in the Bible, the number 40 has really special significance, especially regarding preparation. Which remember, we said Lent is a preparation for Easter. And in Exodus 34, we read that Moses fasted for 40 days and 40 days on Mount Sinai while he was preparing the tablets for the Ten Commandments. In 1 Kings 19, Elijah went 40 days and 40 nights without food. And check out what it says in Matthew 4, 1 through 2. The definition from Webster about Lent kind of mentioned this, but Matthew 4, verse 1, this is the ESV. "Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry." There's some really great statements in the Bible, and that is one of them. There's the guy named blind Bartimaeus in Mark chapter 10. Jesus says, the guy walks up to him and says, hey, I'm blind, here I am. And Jesus goes, "What do you want me to do for you?" Well, duh. I want to see. I've talked about that a couple weeks ago. Jesus fasted 40 days and 40 nights alone, and this is just before he's tempted by Satan. You might have heard that story before. And some people think that Jesus is fasting alone in the desert to make himself really weak so that he could be at his most vulnerable, so that we could say Jesus was so weak and so vulnerable that he's experienced everything that we've experienced. He's been tempted. But what if Jesus went to fast and pray in order to prepare himself for the temptation, not just to weaken himself? Because I think Jesus knew that fasting and focusing was exactly what he needed to prepare for what was coming. Not just to be weak, but to prepare. So by observing Lent for 40 days, as the definition says, we are following in the footsteps of those who have gone before us, including Jesus Christ himself. We are preparing ourselves not just for the Easter celebration, but also just to be fully devoted followers of Christ. By humbling ourselves, by focusing on him. As Paul says, when I am weak, then I am strong. His power is made perfect in my weakness. So before we kind of turn the corner, and I invite you to think about how you can apply this to your life, here's my quick Bible trivia question. So after all this, what does the Bible say about us observing Lent? Nothing. Lent's not in the Bible, right? Lent is something that Christians like Irenaeus, the Council of Nicaea, it's something they've developed after the Bible was written. So it's not like a biblical, it's not like, hey, 1 Peter 4:7 says Lent. It's not in there. But the things that it's about, fasting, prayer, penitence, sacrifice, these are things that the Bible says are super important to the life of a Christ follower. And so it's a practice that the church has come up with to say we think this is an important rhythm to build into our lives, particularly as a lead up to Easter, a preparation for Easter. The Bible does not command us to give you cheap coffee every Wednesday night, but we do that anyway too. That was funnier than you acted. Anybody ever heard of Mitch Hedberg? Okay, he's a dead comedian. He died. He was a really funny comedian, and whenever he would tell a joke and people didn't laugh, he would say that was funnier than you acted. And now I've been using it on teenagers for years from a dead comedian. You guys think that I came up with it, but I'm not. So what Lent is, I've given you the definition of Lent. We've talked about the history of Lent, kind of the why behind it. So now I'm a pretty practical dude, so I want to talk about how we can incorporate Lent into our lives. Today is day one of Lent. It's Ash Wednesday. We got 40 days, really it's more like 47 days until Easter. April 1st is Easter. What would it look like for you to, maybe I haven't convinced you that it's meaningful, and that's fine, but what would it look like for you to make Lent something that's been practiced for centuries by people who call themselves Christ followers, part of your life? I mentioned a few minutes ago that the number 40 has special significance in the Bible. There's also number 7 has special significance in the Bible. So I want to give you 7 ways to practice Lent this year. Super practical. I want to start with things that you can give up. Things that you can give up, just like the traditional things that you can give up. So number 1 is this. Food. Boom. It's probably not realistic for everybody in this room to fast completely for the next 40 days, but you could give up 1 meal a day. Or you could give up that candy bar that you really love, or that drink that you really like, or drinking bad coffee at Sojourn. It's not really not that bad. It's fine. Yeah. But here's the deal: you're not just giving it up. Just like I've done this before. Okay, I'm giving up Reese's peanut butter hearts for Lent. No, give something up and go. Okay, when I have a craving, I'm going to let that remind me of my weaknesses, because I know what this is about now, and I'm going to turn my mind to Christ, and I'm going to dwell on His purpose and His strength in my life. I'm not just going to give this thing up because I want to lose a couple LBs. I'm going to give this thing up because I want to make room and carve a rhythm into my life for Christ. Number 2, this is a youth ministry word, but screen time. This is something we say to our kids. You hear all these how much screen time do you give your children? Do you live for your phone? Do you live for Netflix? Or I've never I don't think I've played a video game other than with a teenager in the youth group since I was 23. But I know a lot of guys my age who are in their 30s. I have a friend right now, Sam. He's at his house right now playing FIFA on FaceTime with all of his friends from college. This guy's nodding his head. Like it's something that people do. Like you play video games. You're on social media. But I think if we're honest, we recognize that a lot of times our media consumption, what we stare at screens all the time with and for, can be a distraction in our lives. I know it can be for me. We were doing a series this week for students talking about social media and the internet and pornography, and I was telling them about that social media. When you see that it triggers that dopamine effect in your brain that really addicts you to social media. And I am a guitar guy, and so one of the things I use Instagram for is I post pictures of guitars that I own because I'm a guitar nerd, and I use all these hashtags because that's how you get people to like your posts and to find your guitars. So I post this picture of my guitars in my guitar room. Oh, I got some new likes. Oh, that's my picture of Becca from today. And I use more hashtags than usual, and I woke up in the middle of the night. Or not in the middle of the night. I woke up the next day, and it was my phone was like, you have 437 new likes. I was like, what? 437 new likes? My phone is, I'm literally 890 likes. So if after Sojourn, not right now, but if after Sojourn you want to go to @TimWildsmith and get me up to 900, that'd be really awesome, because I'd feel better about myself. My whole point with telling you that was that I was telling teenagers not to do exactly what I'm doing right now. What happens if you give up something like that? Becca, last year for Lent, gave up social media. And it did what in your life? Life-giving. What if you took 40 days off from your favorite show or your favorite social media app? Does that sound impossible? Probably for some of us, but what if you started small? What if you built up to that? And what if you took the time that you were giving up with that and you replaced it with something that had to do with Jesus? Give up number 3. This one's going to be tough for some of you. What if you gave up complaining? What if you gave up negativity? Saw a couple people cringe. Me too. We complain a lot, don't we? I work on a church staff, and I find myself walking into someone else's office on the church staff going, "Did you hear?" Complaining. I looked at Lori when I said that because she knows that I stand in her doorway. What if you made a commitment tonight that you were not going to complain for the next 40 days of Lent? Think about what that would do to your life. And here's the problem with that is that you can't just make that commitment. You probably need to tell somebody about it. Your friend, your family, your mom, your dad, your dog, and say, hey, I need you to hold me accountable because I want to try this. And then you have to do the tough work of when that person says to you next week, I thought you weren't going to be negative anymore. Then you have to respond to that without being negative, right? Like when oh, sorry, Becca, I won't talk about the car again today. What about number 4? That one sin. Is Lent an opportunity for me to recognize my real weaknesses? To really look at the thing that I know has got its claws in my heart, in my soul, and I've got a list of things here, but I'm not gonna name a bunch of stuff. What is it? You're all sitting here. You know what it is. What's that thing for you that you are struggling with? And there's not a better time than this season right now to say, in a season where I'm recognizing my weaknesses, this is my biggest one, or maybe you got 2 or 3, and I'm going to give this up. I'm going to surrender this to Christ. I'm going to focus on Him instead. I'm going to ask Him to help me give this thing up. And then maybe, just maybe you won't pick it back up after Easter. So now let's turn the tables. That's 4 give-ups, and really that's what this is about. But I want to add 3 take-ups. What if you took something up? And these are going to be so stock, cheesy, churchy answers, and I'm so sorry about that. But I just couldn't help myself. Take-up number 1 is this. It's just simply prayer. It seems kind of obvious, I know. But if you're not in the habit of spending time with God, communicating with God through prayer on a daily basis, I think that choosing to take that up over Lent will change your life. To make it a daily thing, I think it could be a huge blessing for you. And I'm not talking about, maybe you need to wake up every morning and roll out of bed and instead of looking at your phone. By the way, you can still buy an old school alarm clock. That's been my excuse for years. But my phone's my alarm clock and my noise machine. You can still buy alarm clocks and noise machines. Plug your phone in the freaking kitchen so that you don't stare at it before you get out of bed, right? That was for me more than it was for you. What if you woke up every morning and spent 5 minutes praying? What if there's this awesome old book by a guy named Brother Lawrence, who's a monk from hundreds of years ago, called Practicing the Presence of God? What if you said, hey, I'm going to practice the presence of God, where I'm not even going to say amen, because I'm going to be practicing prayer with God throughout my day. I'm always going to be checking in with God. Prayer and communication with God is going to become a rhythm of my life all the time. It'd be hard to be complaining and negative if I knew I had an open dialogue with God going on throughout my day. Take up number 2. Again, I'm sorry, these are so churchy. The Bible, right? I've been in seminary. I get a really big cheat on this, and I've told my students this over the past few years. I like being a pastor mostly because in order to do the work that I have to do, I have to spend time in the Bible every week. I'm a better Christian because I work on staff at a church, because in order to do my job and to actually keep my job, I've got to read the Bible. Now I've added seminaries to that. So I'm reading the Bible all the time, and I'm digging into God's word, and it's actually doing something in my life. I don't think about the Bible the same way that I did 3 years ago at all, but I'm more in love with it than I've ever been. Right? I'm learning so much about it, and it's soaking into it. There's this app, which I think 14 billion people in a world of only 8 million, which is really impressive, have downloaded. It's called the Bible app. It's a church in Oklahoma called Life Church, and they've created this Bible app. Most of you have it on your phone, and you can click it, and you can go to plans right there in the middle, the tab at the bottom, and it's going to say find plans at the top. And now there's the one I did last year, Lent for Everyone. I can't recommend this enough. A dude named N.T. Wright. You hear me talk about him. You hear Brandon talk about him. He's an English dude who's a really great biblical scholar. Lent for Everyone is 53 days, starts today, and he walks you through the book of Matthew, and it's your reading Bible, and N.T. Wright is basically talking about this in normal human everyday terms and just talking you through it. I'm not going to do that one because I did it last year, but literally if you just search Lent, you're going to find a bunch of Lent reading plans. What if you used your phone to read the Bible every day during Lent? That's so obvious. I'm going to stop. Number 3, church. We're here every week, all right? I'm here Sundays and Wednesdays. But what if you made being here a priority in your life for the next 6 weeks through Easter? Because we're going to worship, and we're going to talk about Jesus, and we're going to try to do that in authentic ways. And I believe that by plugging in, and it's not just church, it's not just showing up. I don't really care about that. It's about plugging in and meeting the people around you and finding community. It's about talking to someone and introducing yourself and saying, hey, let's go get coffee, because that's what this is about for me, and I think that's what we should be about. 7 ideas, 4 give-ups, 3 take-ups. So just stop real quick. Nothing on the screen. What would you add to the list? I'm not asking you to say it out loud. I'm saying, what is it for you? What do you need to give up that I didn't mention? What do you need to take up that I didn't mention? And for me, it's if Lent's never been a practice in your life that you've been serious about, I challenge you for this to be the year. For you to go home tonight and say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start tonight. I'm going to start tomorrow morning. Lent is going to be something that I'm going to make a rhythm of my life for the next few weeks until Easter. And here's the deal. This is not something that you're doing on your own. You're joining a tradition that for centuries Christians and people of faith and people of not of faith have been taking up and giving up things in order to recognize their weaknesses and to make room for Christ. For me, the reality of this is very simple. Easter is on the horizon. Lent is a beginning of a season where we slow down and we focus, but we are seeing on the horizon that we know he's going to be raising from the dead, that Jesus is king, and that, as Paul said, his strength is enough for our weaknesses. And so I don't have to have it all figured out. I don't have to do it perfectly, but I do have the ability to slow down and to let God speak into my life. For me, understanding more about Lent the past few years of my life has been an avenue for me to experience Christ in a different way that I didn't really know growing up, that I didn't really know even as I became a young adult and now a not so young adult. But I'm learning, how do I say this? This isn't in my notes. I'm learning that God doesn't work the way that I have him in a box. That's not how he works. And just because I was raised a certain way and grew up that God's capable of doing things. And for me, when I allow myself to experience something that's a little bit out of my comfort zone, God tends to show up in unique and very powerful ways in my life. And so that's what I'm kind of after is willing to be vulnerable with God, willing to be vulnerable with myself, and let him speak into it in a way that I might not expect. And so I think trying new things and making this a part of your rhythm for the next few weeks could be a really powerful thing for you. So let's pray. Father, God, I recognize in myself that I like to kind of have control over how you work and what you're going to do in my life. And Lord, I want to just say that I'm weak and that I have weaknesses and that I'm not perfect. And I thank you for providing me with an opportunity through Lent to say that and to recognize that. And Lord, I ask that you would use the next few weeks of my life recognizing my weaknesses and letting your strength be enough for me to show me something that I don't even know now. To see something about you, about your word, about your reality in this world around me that I don't even see now. And as together, God, we press into this next series about meaning and purpose and who we are, Father. Would you bind us together as a group of people who care about one another, who want to ask tough questions, and who want to see what you have for us. Lord, we love you. Amen. Would you